سخنرانی اول ما جناب آقای دکتر داریوش نویدی هستن که از ایشون خواهش میکنیم که مطالبشون شروع بکنن.
من یک مقدمه مختصری رو به فارسی میگم و بعد متن خودم رو به انگلیسی ارائه خواهم داد. متن سخنرانی خودم. این تنها کردها در ایران نیستن که تحت ستم هستند و حقوق ملیشون پایمال شده. آذری ها، ترک ها، بلوچ ها، عرب ها، تمام ملیت های ساکن ایران این وضع رو دارن و هر کدوم از ما گوشه‌ای از اون رو امروز عنوان میکنیم. من به سخنرانی خودم که به زبان انگلیسی است میپردازم و سخنرانی من در مورد کولبرها هست. Today I'm going to talk about a particularly exploited section of Kurdish workers from Iran's Kurdistan who are often attacked and some are killed in the pursuit of trying to make a basic living for themselves and their families. These are called kulbars. The meaning of kulbar is someone who carries goods on their back. Its practical and local meaning refers to people who carry commodities for sale from Iran's Kurdistan to Iraqi Kurdistan and back. Therefore, kulbar is an economic concept in the area as well as a sociological one, which I will briefly refer to at the end. Kolbar in Kurdistan has a historical background. It has been documented at least since World War I. At that time, most of the transactions was between Iran and Iraqi Kurdistan and the north of Iran and back. Commodities such as smoked fish, rice, and goods made in Russia were taken to Suleymaniye in today's Iraqi Kurdistan. And the spices and commodities from the United Kingdom and India were taken back to Iran. Given the very long distances between Suleymaniye and the Caspian Sea in Iran, obviously these were carried on the backs of horses and mules. Once the Pahlavi dynasty was firmly established, the borders were controlled and these people were unable to carry out their activities openly. They had to smuggle their commodities. Therefore, they were called qaçaqçis, which in Farsi and Kurdish has two meanings. One, those people who traffic drugs, the drug traffickers in a way. And second category is those people who smuggle commodities. In the context we're talking about those people who are carrying commodities only, smuggling commodities, not drugs. These people are not involved in any way in drug trafficking. After the overturn of the Pahlavi regime in Iran, and with the Islamic Republic as yet unable to control the borders, the dominance of Peshmerga, freedom fighters, forces in Kurdistan, meant that the commodity transactions were carried out openly once again. The Peshmerga forces used to charge the people who carry commodities either on their backs or on horses some custom duties which they use for their expenses in fighting the Islamic Republic of Iran. Kolbars were no longer called qaçaqçis or smugglers then. But gradually, the military forces of the Islamic Republic dominated Kurdistan, and Peshmerga forces retreated to Iraqi Kurdistan. With the Pasdaran Islamic Revolutionary Guards now controlling the borders and them having a monopoly themselves on smuggling themselves commodities, once again, the Kolbars became known as qaçaqçis or smugglers, and their activities became much more complicated and indeed very dangerous. Why some people become kulbars? People's demands for some commodities in Iran and also in the other side, in Iraq, and the existence of a large number of unemployed and poor people living in the border areas have given a chance to middlemen to exploit this situation and to make vast profits. Hence, the relevance of kulbar as an economic concept is to be discussed. Iran's Kurdistan, after Sistan and Baluchistan, is possibly the poorest part of Iran. The rate of unemployment in Kurdistan is about 1.5 higher than the average unemployment rate in Iran, which is around 15% according to the statistics of the government itself, which is underestimated, I believe. I believe that the unemployment rate in Kurdistan must be at least 20%, and for the young people is much higher than that. Why? Because Kurdistan is predominantly agricultural. The industrial sector is very small, and many of its villages have been depopulated. People have moved to shanty towns in big cities in Iran, such as Tehran, Tabriz, and Hamadan. Some of them also became seasonal workers in construction and brickmaking in other parts of Iran. Among those who are left in Kurdistan and living near the borders, there are many who make a living by carrying commodities between the borders as kolbars. A kolbar must carry around 50, 40, 60 kilograms of goods on their shoulder, on their back, in winter, in summer, in hot and cold weathers. And they must walk many hours through mountainous areas and in forest areas as well. During the summer, the situation is easier but more dangerous because pasaran are more alert and watching the kolbars easily. Therefore, the kolbars need to be very careful to avoid being ambushed by pasaran and soldiers who are from different nationalities within Iran. They cannot speak Kurdish, and often they may not even understand it. This is the most dangerous time for the kolbars. They may be shot at if the pasaran wish to do so, be arrested and taken to prison, or at best be forced to bribe the pasaran after being insulted, shouted at, and beaten. They are let to go. Having avoided their ambushes or paid bribes to pasaran, the kolbars have to find someone on the other side of the border to buy their goods. Usually, the prices are fixed, and the possibility of bargaining to get a better price by kolbars is very small, is very limited. At the moment, the kind of things carried are petrol and electrical goods to Iraqi side and bringing back perfume, makeup, and alcoholic drinks for the consumption of people in Iran usually. As already mentioned, pasaran are the main smugglers of commodities and as well as drug traffickings in all borders of Iran, including Kurdistan. Therefore, they regard the kolbars as their main competitors. This is why they do not tolerate them. Information gathered by the Human Rights Campaign states that the number of kolbars shot at and killed between 2010 and 11 are at least about 150. And during 3 months of March to May 2012, 74 kolbars were killed. 70 of them were shot and killed, and 4 were killed by stepping on mines or dying from cold. This is the minimum number of people because the Human Rights Campaign has been able to establish their identity. However, the number of those killed must be much higher. Among the kolbars, there are children as young as 12 and 13 years old. For example, we know of a 13-year-old boy called Shadman. He was the only breadwinner in his family and was carrying a huge weight of petrol on his back during a cold night in winter. To warm himself, he made a fire. Because there were some drops of oil on his clothes, they caught fire. Despite being taken to a hospital in Iraq by other kulbars, he died. Female kulbars are a new phenomenon. They are usually older women over the age of 40, let's say, who have lost husbands or sons, or whose husbands are no longer capable of working. Shadman's mother is one of them, who became a kulbar herself. They have to take on responsibility of being the breadwinners and supporting their families. Some kulbars who have been able to save some money, can buy horses or mules to carry commodities. By doing so, they are able to carry more goods and therefore make more money. But again, this is also very dangerous because it is easier for the pasaran to spot them from a longer distance. In many cases, they have been shot at. When carrying petrol, this meant that the horses became a big fireball and ran into the forest and triggered a forest fire. We even know of cases where pastoran have stopped people from putting out the fires. Kulbars can be considered among the lowest of the low in society, and they do not enjoy any prestige in their community in Kurdistan, in both Kurdistan actually. In Iraqi Kurdistan they are called Iranian in a disrespectful way, and in Iran's Kurdistan they are the lowest of the low really. Of course, to tackle the phenomenon of kulbars, fundamental political, economic and social changes in Iran and Kurdistan are necessary. But for now, it is important to ensure that the human rights of kulbars to live and not to be shot at and killed and injured must be recognized. The UN must put pressure on the Iranian government to recognize this basic right. The right of children to have education and to play, and they emphasize, and to play, because they don't play really, must be emphasized. The right to medical care, unemployment benefit, and proper retirement benefits will stop these poor people having to take on such a dangerous work and be killed by pastorals. These are the minimum human rights of these people that one can campaign for and try to make the Iranian regime to recognize and accept them. At the end, I want to suggest two documentaries and film to be clearly watched. One is called Beyond the Borders of Hopelessness by Sarvestani, who is, I believe, living in Sweden. It's a fantastic documentary. And the other one is The Time for the Horses to be Drunk. وقت مستی اسبا or something like that. Anyway, these two documentaries and film are fantastic and providing very detailed analysis in a way of the situation of kulbars in Iran. And thank you very much for hearing me.